All right, waka waka waka, everybody. Boy, that didn't quite go as I wanted to. Happy Friday! Happy Friday! I don't have a particular thing to do today. I don't have a particular what's the word I'm looking for? Objective. I got some blog posts we can look at. I do have a bit of a hard stop at 3 because we're driving out of town this weekend. So that's maybe the only mitigating factor. Otherwise, I'll just talk about stuff, and then really the floor is yours. All you have to do is take it. I always ask for folks to bring me stuff, and everyone seems more than happy just to let me go on and on. So please bring me your whatever, your topics, your questions, anything you'd like to discuss. If you missed it, and why wouldn't you have? And I'll switch over to the other channel here. Look at this. Here we go. Whoop, whoop. You'll notice, or I posted a video on the other channel, on the Behind the Screens channel. This was something I just ran across. It was kind of an interesting little bit. It's something I'll probably do more of over there. I don't want to spend. I think one of my goals for the other channel is I want to keep it kind of loosey goosey. I want to be able to maybe talk about stuff that I don't think is really maybe not worth a whole lot of time, or I don't want to bring, I don't want to get kind of too much into it. But over there, I feel like it might be the place like, oh yeah, well, this is maybe not important enough or whatever. I don't know, important's not the right word. Whatever, it's not quite what I'm kind of on about normally, but over there, I could maybe take a look at it and chat about it. And it just so happened on my way to game night last night, I was on the subway and I was going over my RSS feeds, and I ran across a blog post, and it was just kind of interesting. They were talking about the compatibility between the 2014 D&D rules and the 2024 D&D rules, and they ran across this thing, and when I was reading it, I'm reading the example they're calling out, it just didn't seem to wash with me. So I just made a little video where I kind of went through that a little bit. But we'll you can go to the other channel. I also created a community post, so if you don't know how to get to the other channel, if you check out the community tab on this channel, there should be a post that links over there. So that's that. And it's short. It was 6, just under 6.5 minutes. It ain't long. Let's see. So as I mentioned, bring me your. I'm here for you. So, and I'm losing my voice. I just have some water here for the working man. So bring me your comments and questions and topics and all that. In the meantime, I did grab some blog posts. Let's see, and I can grab some more, I guess, if need be, or we can go to Reddit. I don't know. I try to avoid Reddit for the most part, but I still go and check it out just on the side. I won't add my own. I'm not going to add content to them. Okay, so here's one. This was from the Roll to Doubt blog, rolltodoubt.wordpress.com. I will drop a link to it in the chat, called Organizing Rival Parties. Rival Parties. There we go. That's in the chat if you want to follow along. When was this posted? It was posted pretty recently. Yeah, today. Organizing rival parties. Villains might be appalling and monstrous, but rival adventurers dare to steal your ish before it was yours. Those are the bastards who pump players up. But how to organize running these unforgivable scams? Take Mouse Ritter's faction procedures. Each faction has resources and goals. Goals require 2 to 5 progress marks depending on complexity. At every faction turn, Mouse Ritter defines as between sessions, roll a d6 adjusting value for each resource that would help the faction, adding, or for each resource interfering faction has, subtracting. If 4 to 5, mark 1 progress. If 6 plus, mark 2. A player interference might add or subtract as the GM prefers. Create as many rival adventure parties as you want, although most games will do just fine with 1. Check the adventure locations you are planning to run and what treasure is there, especially artifacts, as well as dungeon factions and monsters that are particularly attractive to form alliances with or outright employ into service. Set some of those as the rival's goals. When it's time to check on each party, consider whether the party's actions in the location, parenthetically in or directly, excuse me, affect the rival's main interest. The players might have pissed off a faction who's currently very sore towards adventurers, including their rivals. They might also have accidentally cleaned the way for the rivals to get something. Roll and see if any advancement was done. This does mean that sometimes the rivals might be close to getting an artifact only to have that gold disappear under their noses if the players get it during a session. Or that just sets the progress track down as the rivals start to plan and organize to steal from the players. Keep their presence in mind when doing restocking of the locale. Maybe a door is now stuck or open, maybe treasure was moved, and maybe a trap was set or sprang. The rivals are as good an explanation as any without having to consider if a whole new faction moved in. You could add an extra layer, take your campaign calendar, you are keeping strict time records, correct? Roll a die at the beginning of the month for each party, value equal to the number of days. Mark when each party is planning an excursion to the locale, you'll have an idea of what they are doing before and after, plus sowing rumors of their plans so players can interfere if they want to. This is also useful for other events and faction plans in the campaign, not just rivals. Excuse me. Okay. So this is a neat idea. I like it. The one thing I would say, though, is that it seems like, if I'm understanding this correctly, that these rivals are entirely off screen, and I don't think that's what I would want. I like the idea that they're getting closer and they're doing stuff, and that kind of just using a simple whatever I mean, you can use whatever faction mechanic you want to for a rival adventuring, but what I would do maybe instead, or in addition to this, let me try to think how I would do this. So, rivaling adventuring companies is something that, and this is going to be very dependent on what game system you're playing, but in kind of old school games, if I'm, let's see, where's my, hold on a minute. Where is my, here it is. All right, if I go to, and this is just I don't have a nice cover for it, but it's my binder with B and X in it. If I go to my basic dungeon encounters, hold on, maybe this might be a more, hold on a minute, a more interactive way. Whoops, that's from my other video. Woo. Also that, woo. Get out. Expert, how about, we've got basic here, easily to get, no. Let's see, hold on a minute. Actually, you know what, well, we'll just do wilderness for right now. If we come, actually, it might not work in wilderness. Hold on a minute. I might need to go and grab basic. Let me see. Where am I looking here? Do we have, it would be under men, right? Whoops. Pioneer Buccaneer, let's see, Brigands. Well, you get these, what's the asterisk? Yeah, that's not quite what I want. Hold on a minute. Let me get my copy of X, or B rather, out. Let me just see where I can find it. No, not there. I need to clean up my drives here. I got stuff scattered all over the place. D&D basic, rule set, basic. There we go. All right, so if I were to come, scrolling, where am I remembering where we're going here? Can I remember? Hold on a minute. Let's see, treasure. Here we go. Yeah, it'll be down here. Okay, stocking the wandering critters. Oh man, it's be sprites, traders. Is it not here? Rival adventuring party? I thought it would be. Hold on. Rival. Right? Is it not there? Really? Well, I could have sworn it was here. Boy, I went to a whole thing for nothing. Basically, what oftentimes you'll have as a random encounter in a dungeon. Maybe if I looked at a specific dungeon, I would have one, but I could have sworn one would be here. Oh, here it is, NPC party. That's what it is. See, look at that. I'm just not looking at the right thing. I was thinking it's rival party, but it's NPC party. So if we look at NPC party, if I can find out where they define it anywhere, you get a group. So you see, okay, creating it, and so you even get a whole thing. So creating an NPC party, right? So you can follow these steps. You determine the number of NPCs and who they are and their stats, blah blah blah. And so this shows up in the encounter lists. So you'll get, let's see, you can't get it on the first level, but where do they start coming in there? It looks like it's not on the second level either, but then third level, they show up. And you go, okay, instead of creating them as a faction at first, I mean, you can. I mean, I guess you could do it either you can do it either way. Two ways to do it. One, go ahead and create some rivals and have them as a faction. And yeah, use Mouse Ritter if you don't have faction rules. Use your own rules if you have them, and then you can see them in the world. Uh, if the party comes into town, maybe, and you get some things, you say, oh, the I don't know, the Black Axes. You heard of the Black Axes? They were there a couple days ago. I heard the Black Axes were looking for the dungeon of Blarg. Oh, really? The Black Axes? Oh, who are the Black Axes? Oh, okay. Then maybe they in the village or in the town they could run into the Black Axes or members thereof and blah blah blah. And then when you get inside the dungeon itself and you roll one of those and put the Black Axes as an encounter in that dungeon, add them in since they're operating there. Maybe put it at a low percent. You can use whatever different rules you want to modulate what the potential is that the Black Axes show up. There they are. And now you've got this context of these people you heard about, and now they're actually here. And then, yeah, if you've set up their faction, what do they want? What are they, all that kind of stuff, their goals, and is whatever the party's doing, is it helping them on their goals? Is it interfering with their goal? Whatever, you can figure that out. But I think it's one of the cool things is to have the rivals be there in some way. These rules seem to kind of keep them completely off screen, or you might come into the dungeon, you see a fresh trap has been laid down, and it must be the Black Axes, but you never actually see the Black Axes. And then the Black Axes are moving through on the side using these rolls, but then when their thing gets dropped away from, the party swooped in and took it, there's no interaction there. And there's no reason not to have the interaction. I think what you have to do is, if you've had them on some kind of track and they're reaching a position where they're almost there and the party is there, then that's when you can insert them in the dungeon, or that's when you can give them a higher probability of showing up in the dungeon. You could even, if you want to have it, say, oh, they're just at their goal, and this is that point where the party comes and goes, nopes it, then maybe when the party's leaving the area, the Black Axes show up. Because they were right there, and the party beat them to the punch, but they're still there. They're in the area. That's one way to do it. You can pre-plan your faction, and then have it trigger when you get that encounter. Another way to do it is just have a generic party as the encounter in some area. And you can have this in the wilderness. I mean, you can have it anywhere, and I would have it everywhere. Being in town, if you have town settlement encounters, if you've got wilderness encounters, if you've got dungeon encounters, and then when you need it, and maybe you could make up some or have a quick generator around to quickly make some. Then when the party encounters them, then make the faction stuff for them. So that, it's just some guys, maybe in the moment, or use a generator to come up with some kind of name for them. And it's like, oh no. And of course, assuming they survive that encounter, or even maybe if they don't, in case people have heard of them, you can kind of come up with, the Black Axes. Oh, we destroyed the Black Axes, when we ran into them in the tunnels below the mausoleum, and it's like, oh my gosh, the Black Axes, oh no. And maybe the Black Axes worked for somebody. I was watching Big Trouble in Little China the other night, and it says the Lords of Death are just errand boys for the Wing Kong and Lo Pan ultimately. So if your party comes in and they wipe the floor with the Lords of Death, well, the Lords of Death aren't the end of it. They're just they're just the tip of the spear, so to speak. And now you might have to deal with the Three Storms and Lo Pan and all the Wing Kong exchange. So, excuse me, I don't know why my voice decides to fail me right when I'm on video. So I would have that. So I really like this in terms of thinking about those parties, thinking about them as factions. But I wouldn't substitute it for having the faction show up. In fact, I would marry these two systems together. Take the encounter system and even bolster it up a little bit, I think, because you could take the encounters, because you don't get them to the third level of the dungeon. And I think that's because the difficulty of these parties can be. I would maybe just modulate it. So yeah, it's not a high probability they're going to be there. But of course, you can use the Mouse Ritter, whatever faction their goals kind of thing to actually figure out their the probability. So imagine if it was a 1 in 6 chance you're going to run into that party, that adventuring party, but then they've been going down the track and, oh no, they made another progress. Now it's 2 in 6. They made another progress. Now it's 3 in 6. Whatever. You probably you need to figure it out. Might use, like, I'm just kind of, you don't want them to be every encounter in your dungeon turns into the wandering party, but you want to increase those odds. And then you also want to build that in with, well, how are you describing the dungeon? Like, what's happening in the dungeon? How is this other party, if they are ahead of the adventurers, how has this other NPC party changed the environment? Have they triggered traps that were, ideally would have just been, laying there, untriggered? Have they triggered them? Did they close doors and use spikes and spike them shut? And now the party gets to a door that otherwise might have just been closed, and now it's stuck because that other party came through and essentially spiked the door behind them. Do they run some corpses or some other angry things? Hey, Mark, how are you? What's changed? And that can be difficult, and maybe that's why the blog post kind of leaves them off screen so that you can sort of, you don't have to do much of it. You can do a little bit if you want to, but you don't have to do a lot. But the more you can do that, maybe the more it'll feel dynamic, right? It'll feel like, oh my gosh, something's coming on. And I think you can cheat in some ways, right? If you know that the other party's ahead of you, and then you're reading in your description in the hallway that there's a pit trap, maybe just spring the pit trap and say, oh, instead of it being closed, it's open. And maybe there's a rope or a whip. If Indiana Jones is the other adventuring party and they use their whip to swing across, maybe you see the whip dangling from the middle of this pit trap, and so you know that not only is it just sprung, which, yeah, traps are sprung sometimes, but then there's a thing here that looks like it was used to get across it, and it doesn't look like that thing's been here very long. So that tells us someone else, some new devilry is afoot. My ear trumpet says, have they riled up the goblins? Yeah, that's a good question. You could totally figure out some mechanics, just roll some dice, roll some reactions, add some penalties. Are they making noise? Are they bringing the enemies to the party? Or conversely, if the party's ahead of the rivals, is what the party's doing making their lives more difficult? And then maybe they do something like give up but wait outside, wait for the party to emerge and be like, all right, we're taking your stuff, which can feel unfair. But I think if you're setting things up, I think the idea, that fairness is kind of a big deal. It is very annoying if the GM just decides, well, they're going to go through the dungeon. As soon as they come out with the dungeon, the bad guys are going to swoop in while they're wounded and take their stuff. Like, that kind of feels kind of sucky. But I think if you're playing by rules, if you're setting up procedures and mechanics, and you're able to signpost and give context, and the party knows the Black Axes are out here, the Black Axes were here, you saw their camp from a few days ago, right? Then it's like, okay, now the party's been made aware, right? Things are happening. It's not some kind of har when someone just swoops out and pulls out, which I think could still happen. And if it's a good table and everyone trusts each other, then you'll understand that that's part of the game. But if you're not sure, add some context around. But that's a cool idea. I think like I said, I think the only thing I would add really is just have it so that they can appear in the game. And then whatever your prep style, if it's easier for you to make these rivals ahead of time and flesh them out as factions, and then pull them in when you roll up an encounter in a dungeon, that's one way to do it. Or you can wait until you roll up the encounter in a dungeon or in the wilderness or in town, whatever, and then throw together an NPC party. And heck, you can make a roster of a few of them, just to do, like, just to have. And then when one of them comes up, you can, oh, I got 6 of them, so let me roll to see who's shown up. And then you go, oh, it's the Black Axes, and then run from there. Right, do whatever works. But that was fun. That was cool. That's a good idea, I think. Okay, how are we doing on time? Oh, we're doing good. Hasn't been that much time. Okay, so here we have, this is from Benign Brown Beast, called Doors of the Serpent King. I think there might be spoilers for Tomb of the Serpent Kings in here, so I guess if you don't want to be spoiled, beware. But is that really a concern? I don't know. They also wrote, oh, right, actually, this is interesting, because I found this blog post today, but then yesterday, while I was on the train again, this time coming home from game night, I read their review. I'll read their review real quick. It's kind of interesting, and maybe it'll just give some extra context here. They're running this for 5th edition, converting it. I guess there is a conversion to 5th edition, so they're running for this. So that's some context. So things are going to be different. But I always think it's interesting. I think it's neat to see when you take something from one era, you port it to another era, different rules, different expectations, different, people and all that and how it works. Mark Morrison says, one time I had a rival team beat them to the treasure room. Left the Kilroy here. Made for some great role playing. Only did it once. Yeah, you want to do everything with care. I mean, it's fine if you're using. I think if you've got a mechanics, you just don't want to be like. I mean, at least I don't like that. Just by my fiat, this has happened. It's like let the dice roll, because I think you'll get those natural ebbs and flows, and it won't feel like you're forcing things. But when in doubt, don't overdo it. Hey, Warrior King. I like the leaving some kind of messaging. That's another great thing. They can leave a magic mouth. I mean, that's one if you really want to set up a real rivalry, right? Okay, yeah, it's another adventuring party. So yeah, in the sense they're a rival, a competitor. But if you really want to amp up the fact that no, we know, from the other NPC party, they know that the players' party is out there and don't like them. They can talk a little crap there, leaving messages, magic mouths, other kinds of nonsense and shenanigans. And that stuff will get players going in a good way. I think that will really. There's no way, there's not much that will inspire players to really go for it, like having some NPC get over on them in some way, even if it's totally their fault. I had the famous story of, I don't know if it's famous, whatever, in my campaign of this NPC. He was just a random encounter. I rolled up a random encounter of a magic user, and they kind of abused the poor guy, but the guy escaped, and he became this villain to them because he just got it. They literally kind of enslaved him. They forced him to join the party, and since joined him, they had him tied up. They wouldn't let him go. They were sort of dragging him around the wilderness. And when he escaped, he decided that his goal was to take out this party. And he did it not using spells, but really just swaying the public's opinion against them. And how the party was, hated it and was like, oh, we're going to get that guy. The thing is, it was their own fault. Like they created their enemy, but yet that enemy just doing things I think were pretty on point for having been, kidnapped by some sort of aggressive, kind of do-gooders, but still kind of aggressive do-gooder group. He took it personally, and then they took it personally. All right, so here we go. We'll read this. This is, did I put the link for the review? No, let me put the link for review. Tomb of Serpent King's review. Okay, there's that one also, if you want to follow along. The adventure I spent, and of course I'm speaking as the blogger, the adventure I spent the most time with this year was Skirple's Tomb of the Serpent King, running it for a group of 5e players. I also made good use of Itai Asaf Reisman Grief's 5th edition conversion notes. There's more of the dungeon to explore, but I'm reviewing what we have had a chance to play so far. Spoilers, etc. below. For the unacquainted, Tomb of the Serpent King is a learning dungeon designed to ease new players into a classical, more lateral mode of dungeon exploration. I'm going to zoom in here because don't need to be so small. It doesn't have a gimmick, it's not a full campaign, and it's not a single-page blank slate. Instead, it's intended to be a mid-sized dungeon that's simple to run, and fun to play, and which is full of lessons. The lessons aren't explicit, but they're called out for the GM. For example, valuables sometimes take unconventional forms, or traps repeat. The plan for Session 1 was simple. Finish rolling characters, and then play through the False Tomb level to familiarize everyone with the rhythm of the game. The False Tomb level works well for this. The players learned the patterns of the dungeon, exercised some creative problem-solving, and won some small treasures. The draw of a low-level, half-session, discrete amount of dungeon motivated me to try the adventure in the first place. We spent the better part of the year in the dungeon and surrounds, and while we're not done yet, we're on hiatus for the moment. The players haven't encountered Baltoplat or Zizimanter, but have met the goblins and explored most of the upper levels. What didn't work? I'd read the hammer trap a dozen times and thought I'd figured it out, but as soon as I tried to run it, it escaped me. My descriptions were inadequate, and the players spent more time being frustrated than they should have. It really wants a rough diagram and just a couple clarifications. Which way the doors open, which sides the hinges are the hinges on, that type of thing. There's a hidden room behind a statue, following the established pattern of hidden rooms behind statues. Two characters notice that the statue is misaligned. They didn't tell each other, but having only one other example to work from and switching context, they left it alone. I don't think that's a bad thing, but it's not the clear-cut lesson the text suggests. Well, I don't know if it's that it's not the clear-cut lesson or they just didn't learn it yet. But, The 5e rules and playstyle also undermine some of the lessons in the dungeon, namely that combat isn't always necessary. The players saw the stone Cobra Guardian as a boss fight and proceeded to demolish it. The same thing happened to the Basilisk. I hope they don't try to kill the Lich, but I'm not even sure they couldn't. In the 5e stat block for the Stone Cobra Guardian, it's easy to miss the AC bonus from the shield attack. I'd put a reminder in parens after it, but I don't think it ultimately mattered much. For all the logic of the dungeon, some of the traps still feel a little funhouse, which leaves me walking an awkward line between the hammer trap, traps will be signposted, avoidable, interactive, etc., and the stair trap, trust nothing, everything is dangerous, search everything, etc. I don't think my players noticed any incongruity, but I wonder what lessons they've actually learned about exploring a dungeon. And I think this is just something that can happen, right? You're setting up patterns in one spot, and then something is patternless in the other spot. And if the lesson is look for the patterns, then then having the lack of pattern, because remember this is a learning dungeon, right? So it's your this idea of, or it's a teaching dungeon, it's kind of trying to teach you. So you're getting two sort of conflicting messages, and it's not that they can't both be true. Sometimes you're going to get that, and sometimes maybe something looks too good to be true. It looks too empty and clean or whatever. But I can see from someone looking at it like, well, this is supposed to be helping me get my players up to speed on kind of old school sort of dungeons. If you have these two things kind of competing, they're sort of competing lessons. They might not learn anything because you've got these examples that seem to not mesh with each other. Hey, Frederick. I used the Strange Dreams hook to get the party together because I had no idea what kind of characters people would be bringing to the table. I've loosely worked out how the dreams work, but the players with the most elaborate backstories are dissatisfied that they've been delving so long and neither dreams nor backstory have been relevant yet. I do have designs to tie it all together, but the characters just keep going the other direction. This is kind of part of why I don't love elaborate backstories, or or the expectation that because I wrote up an elaborate backstory that it needs to somehow, everything needs to tie into that. Like, I guess as a GM, if you're a player in my group and you want to write out a short story, a novella, a whole novel of backstory, that's great. But your expectation should not be that I want to read all that, or that I am going to pull all this kind of details out of that and make everything that's happening in the campaign somehow relevant to your past. And that's kind of where my disconnect with backstories is. Like, it's great. The more that helps you, as long as it helps you and it doesn't hinder you working with the party, then I'm all good with them. But my being good with them stops when having that elaborate backstory leads to certain expectations. And I think it's kind of hard for it not to, because you've spent so much effort on something that of course you want to see it reflected. And we know that as GMs because we have the same thing. When we're doing all kinds of world building and story building and all this stuff, we also want to see reflected. And it leaves this pressure to sort of shove things that aren't necessarily organic, but they fulfill something for us because we put all this work, we put all this time into it, and we want it to be reflected in the same thing from the players, right? And I think both approaches, are not good. Whoops. All right. Part of the issue is that 5e combat is not only more likely, but also a bit of a slog. When the players fight the Guardian, for example, that's going to take most of that session. So a lot of time is spent fighting, searching, detecting, and prodding, which makes the dungeon feel less engaging than it otherwise might. To help fix this, the 5e adaptation added Smee, a friendly goblin who I ignored entirely. Eventually, the players will meet other non-player characters and have the opportunity to roleplay in the dungeon, but if I were to start again, I would give them that chance earlier. All right, now on to what worked. That said, it's generally been fun, and a lot of things have worked really well. And then he goes through a list. The sarcophagus of Franbinzar, containing both a foul shifting liquid and also the glint of treasure, caused much confusion as the players dropped the lid back in place before getting a better look. The players have made full use of the unfinished room for stashing the supplies and resting. It's just a good feature. Players do not like the abyss and take winding paths to avoid it. Killing the Guardian means there are now wandering monsters throughout the dungeon, and it also affected the regional encounter table. I don't know if the players will notice, but it's satisfying to run. Unlike the hammer trap, the blade hallway was very well received. Quote, that felt very D&D, unquote, to paraphrase our rogue. As we left it, the goblins have just crowned their new king, and there are only 3 weeks to the next full moon. The players know what happens then, but the goblins wouldn't take no for an answer. Okay, so now it says, let's see, snake guts. After the players killed the Stone Cobra Guardian, the Artificer wanted to search for the remains for parts. Between sessions, I took the opportunity to think of possible finds. All right, I think I'm going to skip this part. All right, so I think that's a good thing I think it for the review. It's maybe the main parts. So now, once we have that, see, my ear trumpet says, a 3-book series about their backstory for every party. Yes. Yes, indeed. Like it's good if you know it's like world building, right? I think and I'm not the only one, and I'm sure I didn't originate this advice. I think lots of people say it, but as a GM, if you love world building, world build to your heart's content, but just make sure that you understand that that world building's for you, and don't try to force that on your players or be disappointed when your players don't become as intrigued in the world building stuff you've done as you are. And when you're going to bring it in, make sure it fits the context and it and it's organic on that, right? You as soon as you start to shove your world building in because I've spent hours and days and weeks on this stuff and I want them to do it. I can't believe they're not interested and I'm crying and now I'm like that's that you've crossed the line. And in the same way with backstories, if you love writing backstories and really long histories and really delving into it, great, have a blast. I'm not here to stop you, but understand that that is for you and that should not compel other players or the GM to to take undue weight on from your backstory and have it be spread out everywhere. Understand what's for you, what you're doing for your own joy, and just leave that there. My Air Trumpet says some games have people randomly rolling up backstory events. Yeah, which I think is good too. I mean, I like that. I think because I don't have a problem with backstories. And the thing is this is one of those things where I think that the OSR to some degree, and this is not the first time I've said it, and it's not going to be the last, and lots of people said, right, that there's this difference between what people did back in the day practically and the version or and the OSR. And the OSR in general is fairly anti-backstory. And I've mentioned too, I don't love them. I don't love coming up with them as a player. I don't love reading them as a GM. Yeah, I don't love them. However, backstories were, I mean, I can't really recall playing games, at least as a young adult without some kind of backstory. I remember when I joined a second edition game, at least back in college, we had backstories. My backstories were generally pretty simple. I guess I haven't evolved much since then. I had very, very simple, short and quick backstories. Oh, this guy, he's from this town, he's wandering around, whatever. But we had them. And I think they're good for grounding you, for giving you a sense of, if you don't know if you don't understand what's going on, or you don't know, you can kind of think of where you're from and kind of what you're doing to give you just some grounding, just to give you a base. Like, okay, I'm trying to find out, I just generated this character. Who are they? That backstory can kind of help tell me who they are until they have experiences, which then flesh it out and give the true picture. But this is kind of where they're starting from. And I think that's great. But you don't need a lot of backstory for that. You just need, at least for me anyway, just need some broad strokes. But like I said, if you as a player want to fill in all that stuff, that's great. But for me, I am as GM. I do not. I don't think that's really. I want to talk about your adventures. The adventures going forward. That's kind of my thing. Is what is the story going forward, not fulfilling stuff that you wrote going back. Hey, Terrence. Terrence says, I want each player to script, record, and upload a character lore video of at least 30 minutes with accompanying art. Be careful what you ask for, Terrence. You might just get it. All right, so here we go. So now we're back to the blog post that started us on this journey, Doors of the Serpent Kings. In their review, I'm just going to go from the blogger's perspective. In my review of Tomb of the Serpent Kings, I wrote, quote, I'd read The Hammer Trap a dozen times and thought I'd figured it out. But as soon as I tried to run it, it escaped me. My descriptions were inadequate, and the players spent more time being frustrated than they should have. It really wants a rough diagram and a couple clarifications. Which way do the doors open? Which sides are the hinges on? That type of thing. So that's from the review. And now the blog post continues. I thought I'd try my hand at providing this information for any future GMs who might need it, starting with a survey of what we know about these doors. Okay, so I guess we're getting the description of the leading up to it, so which is a long corridor with 4 open rooms, 2 on either side. The hallway ends at a large barred door made of stone leading to the false king's tomb. Okay, so that's from page 4 of Tomb of the Serpent Kings. Hold on, I got some comments. So Terrence says, in truth, I would like a few backstory bullet points that illustrate the kind of adventuring hooks and character goals they want, and the no fun allowed adds, it all started when I was a farmer. I picked up a sword and realized that one day of adventure could earn me more than I would earn in my whole life. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it, right? Maybe if you want to have something else that happen, I think having some kind of event, like, in the hero's journey, they call it the call to adventure. So like what kind of heads you off, keeps you going. Hey, my Air Trauma, thanks again. You were too generous, but I appreciate it. But yeah, you know, if you want to have an event or something, you know, that's great. I think for to Terrence's point about the kind of adventure hooks and character goals they want, I think I can just ask. I prefer to ask the player that because they, when it comes down to it, as at least I think of it like myself. You can tell me I'm playing whomever with whoever goals, but ultimately the kind of adventure hooks I'm going to respond to are not ones that my character wants necessarily, but they're ones that I want. Like, what do I want to do? I want to go dungeon delving. I want to go explore the wilderness. I want to go kill a god. I don't know, whatever. Like, that's going to be stuff like, ooh, Todd, I think that's cool. And then I will make sure that my character also thinks it's cool. Maybe begrudgingly or whatever. Like, oh, I'm playing a pacifist, but you know what? The only way to get true peace is to kill a god. So let's go. Right? I'm going to figure out a way. I'm going to figure out a way to find that out. So rather than go through and try to, for me anyway, to go through and sort of see if I can glean from these backstories, what do they really want? I'm just going to ask the party, well, what do you want to do? You know, when I was running my BX game, our session 0, part of that was us fleshing out, well, what kind of campaign world do you want? What kind of stuff do you want to be doing? You know, what do you want to do? And then that'll be what we do. And of course, you can revisit that, and you should revisit it because as you play, especially if you're learning new systems and things, and you're a new group of new people, all that stuff can change over time. But you know, I just go straight to the horses' mouths, so to speak. Um, Terrace's Friday's to-do list: buy eggs, kill God. Yeah, and eggs are expensive, so you might need to just go ahead and just kill God first. You know, so yeah. Yep. Okay, now back to this. So, we got this. So, okay, so I guess we're getting some more descriptions of the door. A large door barred with a lengthy piece of stone hung on 2 iron pegs set into either side of the door frame. When the bar is lifted, the iron pegs begin to rise. When the bar is fully removed, a trap is activated. A huge stone hammer swings down from the ceiling, aiming straight for the backs of the now trapped PCs. This trap can be identified by examining the door or pegs, by noticing that the iron peg slowly rises as the bar is lifted, or by checking the ceiling. If the bar is quickly replaced, the pegs are held down, or if the trap mechanism in the ceiling is damaged, the trap will not activate. After firing, the hammer slowly retracts into the ceiling unless blocked. It can be reactivated by lifting up the iron pegs, either by hand or by a rope. Its first activation knocks open the stone doors leading to the false tomb. Now, I guess this is what they wrote. Because now it's interesting here because they were saying that they didn't know about the hinges and things when they were running it. But I can see, and I think there's probably 2 things here, and obviously we'll keep going. But when I read this, it seems pretty clear that the door is swinging outwards from the perspective of the PCs. The doors swing into the false king's tomb, being held in place by this bar. When you raise the bar, the hammer comes down, and the impact of the hammer either on you or against the doors, it bang, swings the doors open. But I can also see how it's not said specifically which ways the doors swing, all that kind of stuff. So in the moment, it can be easy. You're a little bit nervous, lots of things are going on. You're kind of caught in the moment, and then you can't find that information that you might want readily available in the moment to say, door swings inwards towards the tomb. But instead you're getting it, and it feels to me kind of pretty clear from just tracking the procedure, but in the moment it's hard. You can get lost. It can be hard to follow that. There's things going on, people are asking questions, and it's like, I need to know a certain thing, and it's kind of hard to find it in the text. On Terrence's to-do list after buying eggs, killing God is folding clothes. Yeah, I already folded clothes. Frederick says, make a letter system like in Red and Pleasant Land that can make a backstory and adventure intro. I'll have to go. I have that somewhere. I should read that again, or just read that bit in it again, because I don't remember it. But it sounds cool. All right, so let's see. So that's all from Tomb, and then we have some more notes from Tomb. Recessed 5 feet into the wall and held closed by a heavy stone bar. The door is barred on the side facing the chasm. If approached from the other side, it cannot be opened without demolishing most of the door. It contains the same type of hammer trap as door 5, but the hammer swings away from the door rather than towards it. All right, so here's some. So I'm curious. So which one is it? So it feels like the first one. This one feels pretty well explained. This one might be kind of tricky. So you've got 5 feet into the, so there's a wall, and then recessed 5 feet into it, you've got this, this door that's held closed, but the bar is on the other side. The door is barred on the side. Okay, the door is barred aside on the side facing the chasm. Presumably, if you're, I'm guessing the context here, for the trap purposes, you're approaching it from the chasm. If approached from the other side, it cannot be opened without getting most of the door. That's fine. It has the same kind of hammer trap as in door 5, but the hammer swings away from the door rather than towards it. So you're approaching the door. Remember, the first trap, you lift up the bar, the hammer hits you from behind, knocks you into the door. This one, you're lifting up the bar, and the hammer's supposed to come back and knock you away from the door. But that doesn't seem to make any kind of sense to me. Because there can't possibly, I don't care, 5 feet is not, to me, 5 feet is not enough. I don't know how you would, it's not enough room. Does someone know Tomb of the Serpent Kings, how they've run that? Because if you can recess that door as far into the wall as you want, but you are at the door lifting up the bar. In the first the false tomb example, that makes sense because you're up at the door. You're up at the door, right? You're like up at the door. And then the hammer's coming behind you. So whatever amount of the hammer can be recessed in the ceiling some bit away. And then, of course, it's got, has an arc to swing down and bangs you into the door. But if I'm at the door, how can the hammer be positioned to knock me back from the door unless it doesn't trigger until I open the doors? And maybe that's what's supposed to do. I'm supposed to lift the thing up and then open the doors, and then the hammer swing, like the doors open and the hammer swings down and then bang, knocks me back. But it says it's the same type of hammer trap as the other one, and it can't be. I got to be missing something. You can recess I'm at the door. So where's the room for the hammer to swing down and hit me? The door's there. I don't, someone let me know if I'm seeing that incorrectly. But it doesn't make sense to me. It has to be that the trap would work. The way I see this trap working is it works on the door swinging open, and the door swings open, and then blam, you get hit and knocked back, and then maybe the door swings shut again. That's the only thing I can think of. Does that make sense? I don't know. Somebody tell me if I'm just seeing this all wrong and I'm missing something, because it could totally be. But that's what I got. So here are their observations. It would seem that this is in fact a single door, not a pair of double doors, although later it is described as doors plural. The doors and bar are themselves stone, and unusually heavy material for such moving parts. The hammer knocks the doors open, so it must open away from Area 5 and into Area 6. Possibly this is implied to destroy the doors in the process, but they don't read it that way. The iron pegs are definitely in the frame and not in the door itself. There are only 2 of them. The trap resets indefinitely, implying a power source. I mean, it's magic, or I don't know, it could be anything. But yeah, it does imply something. But there could be, I think there's water. Isn't there water in the abyss? Maybe there's a water wheel down there that does something. I don't know. The only way to open the door from this unbarred side is to demolish or dismantle it. Where the hinge is located and what is their construction? I would imagine the hinges are on the opposite side of the door, so you don't have to worry about the hinges if you're on the side that's, I guess, the active side. So I don't know about that, but I could see how party asking that. They could be barrel hinges of metal, but these need to be of significant construction to support the weight. This would be like most hinges in your house, right? Because the hinges are on the door on the inside. So if the door's opening inside, right? I mean, usually, not always, but the hinges are usually a thing. I always think of where you're swinging in, the hinges are there. They could be pivot hinges, continuous parts with stone doors that extend up and down into the holes in the frame. This would be more like a Lego door hinge. They think this is simplest. The mechanism can be reset indefinitely. I guess the mechanism resetting is not. I mean, that's to me that's the least thing. Let's see. Terrence says, or maybe it drops from the ceiling behind you. Yeah. I mean, maybe I need a map, but you're at the door. If the hammer drops behind me and swings, it can knock me into the door, but it can't knock me away from the door, because this is what it's saying. It's the hammer swings away from the door, but how can the hammer really hit me? Because I'm at the door. So, like, where's the hammerhead? Like, the hammer's got a. Hold on a minute. Hold on. I can find something here. The hammer. Let me see if I can find the hammer. The hammer, the hammer. Hold on a minute. Yeah. Let's see if I can draw this out. Hold on a second. Just need to get the tool. Okay. Let's draw this out. All right. So we got a door. So recessed 5 feet. Seems to me like that's kind of what I'm getting, right? Recessed 5 feet. There is a door. And it's got a bar. Then I come here to monkey with the bar. So if there is a hammer, let me use a different color here. If we've got a hammer, okay, are you following me here? How does the hammer swing? I mean, hammer could swing down, but at the distance I am, and I could actually be closer than this. It's like it can't, it's not, like, how does that work? Now, the other side, the first example had a hammer that was like this. And it was swinging down, which to me makes perfect sense. It swings down like that and knocks you into the door. Okay? Are you following me? So, yeah, this works fine. There's a hammer hidden up here. You, bam, you go into the door. Blam, you go through. Door gets knocked out. However, this one, yeah, it could still hit you. I'm not suggesting you can't, but this idea that it's like it's knocking you back, really what it's doing is bonking you. I mean, maybe it's knocking you back, like, I don't know. I feel like the what would happen is you would go like, your reality would go like blam. It would just hit you essentially on the top of your head. But remember, like I'm exaggerating this, so you could be really up close to the door, and then depending on size and things, like how tall is the door, how big is, like, the thing could easily swing just over your head because you're catching it at the very beginning of its, the very beginning of its arc before it's even picked up a whole bunch of energy to hit you, as opposed to this thing getting a nice good swing and then getting you in the back. Now, obviously, if you have a whole party of people here, there might be some question about that. How long is this hammer? Is if there's 5 people but I'm willing to kind of let some of that go a bit. But this other one, just even in reading it, I'm just looking, going, I just don't. How does that? I don't know how that works. I don't know how that's supposed to work, I guess. Okay, so there are the observations. Is there anything else? Let's see. As described, there's no reason to lift the bar at all. You should be able to push the door open and simply crawl under the bar. Oh, I see. If the bar thing is not part of the door, I would. Okay, yeah. I guess I would say that the things. Yeah, I see what they're saying, but I would have to say that there are. I would imagine that there's something holding it in. Like my version of this door would have that, and then the pegs would be, got a couple pegs here, a couple pegs here, and they're notched or something, right? So that they have to lift. It is definitely maybe a bit complicated. I forgot that those are not going to stay. Okay. But this is kind of funny because it does illustrate an issue with traps. It's the challenge of traps, because you create this trap, but different people see it differently. Like the author and I see these traps somewhat differently, or at least some of the things that they are important to them that they want to solve for. I don't care about. Like to me, there's pegs in the door. That's how the trap works. What that means, what that says about the construction of the door in terms of its material. Is it solid stone? Is it a facing of stone with its mechanics? I don't care about that super much. If the party starts investigating it, obviously there has to be something in there for these things to go up. So there has to be some, it just kind of has to be, and that's fine. But who knows how Skirples and who knows how other people who have run this and probably haven't had any problem. I mean, other people probably have had problems with it. Maybe are totally different, and other people have had no problems at all. But like, this is how I prefer my traps to be, because they allow the party to investigate and look at it and do things, and you have answers for what they're doing because there is a mechanism, there is a trigger, there are all these things. But at the same time, you can get in this puzzle of, at some point, it's almost too complicated. like you're like, how complex a machine is this trap, and why? And like, boy, that's a lot of moving parts just for this kind of thing, right? And almost, I feel like it just would be a lot simpler if just you open the doors and the hammer swings down. But they're doing it with, the bar. I think the nice thing about the bar, just aesthetically, or maybe on a meta level, is it gives something for the party to play around with and interact with. Where if it's just pushing open the doors, then it kind of just becomes one of those, I don't know, you either detect traps or you don't. Whereas this kind of like, oh, you can investigate. Oh, you can look. I mean, not that you can't do that with just plain doors, but the signs would have to be more subtle, or I guess it could be more obvious. You'd have to figure that out. But this is the bar kind of has an obvious point of interaction with the door, which I think is good. Terrence says their version would be a cannon that fires chainsaws. Well, hey, that works too. So they've diagrammed this whole thing out. We can also think a little about the mechanism, not enough to fully model or build it, but enough to offer a description or explanation as it's investigated. The reset is perpetual, but it is non-magical. Perhaps there is a somewhat distant underground stream that drives it with a ratchet. Boy, look at that. That's what I said. The reset is slow, so perhaps the hammer is lifted by a ratcheting mechanism. Lifting the pins disengages the ratchet, causing the drop. This behavior is slightly different than described, as it would require replacing the bar before the reset is possible. We can take the reset behavior as a given and assume that it works as described. Yes, I mean, that is an interesting thing, right? It's who is resetting the bar onto the trap. It's a fair question, because if you're supposed to be somewhere nobody's been before, and this bar, which is something that the way this whole thing's set up, you take off the bar to trigger the trap. So if you were going to reset the trap, there's no automated way without magic for someone to put that bar back on, unless somebody literally comes around, make sure the door's closed, make sure the the hammer's down, and then I don't know, whatever comes around. Even if the hammer went back and thus the pegs descended, or I guess the pegs, it's held by weight. So the peg, you basically need a mechanic, some kind of handyman, dungeon handyman, Snyder of the dungeon. Boy, that's an old reference, but look it up, kids. Snyder the handyman needs to come around and reset that, which in some cases would totally make sense, but maybe not for what's supposed to be a tomb, that's hidden and secret and held by long eons. Unless, of course, the idea is that no one's triggered it before, which is fine. But that then you have to make sure that either there are other ways for things that are not native to the dungeon to have gotten around it, some other passageway through, or some explanation as to who's resetting all those traps. Alien qualities of the Serpent Kings. The initial solution, that removing the bar is unnecessary, could be made into part of something larger. A later trap occurs on the stairs. The third stair from the top is slightly loose and has left very faint scratches on the walls. If any weight is put on it, the stairs tip to become a smooth stone ramp, which, while classic in presentation, doesn't offer the same foreshadowing as the hammer traps and others in the dungeon. Worse, it doesn't even make sense. Snakes can't skip stairs. How do snakes go downstairs anyway? Would they hit every step? But that's a good point. Worse, okay, but it could be a weight thing also. If snakes are distributing their weight differently, then that matters also. Of course, I don't know what is the weight of a giant snake? I don't know. But what if that itself were a clue? There's another path downwards, a smooth-floored secret passage. If snakes don't need to remove the bar from the hammer trap door, they simply slither under it, then perhaps snakes don't need stairs either. There is something compelling to exploring a space built for an alien mindset. I don't think Tomb of the Serpent Kings is quite there, but it might be remixable. Oh, that's a cool door. I was okay. So that's a cool idea, right? This idea of if snake people built this thing, how exactly did the snakes do it? Of course, if you're building it just for snakes, then you don't need these doors at all. You could just have holes, or hobbits building hobbit doors, and snakes would build snake doors, which could be interesting of itself. However, if the snakes were the heads of some kind of cult, and commanded humans, then they would need human entrances or human ways of moving through and snake ways or whatever other creatures they used. Terrence says this highlights the importance of secondary education for gelatinous cubes. Why only dungeon janitors? Why no dungeon handyman? That's right. That's right. Well, it's because they tend to destroy their tools other than the metal bits. So that's a cool read. I mean, the door is it is interesting, and I think I think it's interesting probably less in the mechanical parts, but I mean that's interesting too. But just in this interpretation of traps and how difficult it can be to really communicate a trap well. And I think the first instance communicates it fine, and I think it makes okay sense other than the resetting part of it. But the second one to me doesn't make sense, and it's funny because the way it doesn't make sense to me is not how not the same avenues in which the blogger it didn't make sense to the blogger. The blogger was caught up in some of the details, which I think are not that they're unimportant, but I think you could muddle through it because the party, some of the things that they're caring about, the party doesn't, I think, ultimately care. Does it reset? Maybe, but is the party care? I mean, usually you'd just be like, okay, well, we're going to close the door again. I mean, so I guess it depends on what the party's concerned about. Are they concerned about somebody coming and seeing that they triggered the trap and the door's open? Or like, what are they concerned about? Otherwise, you could probably just dismantle take the hammer out of action and call it a day, or stake the doors open, whatever. So, and then I think in terms of the inner workings of, well, how does it work with the stone construction of the door and the pegs? It doesn't matter really. Someone might get into it and then you go, oh yeah, there's some, if you start looking in the whatever the slits where these pegs go up and down, you can see gears, whatever. It's not I don't think that's a huge deal. But you could see how, but for different GMs, like different players, different things kind of trigger responses that we need to work through. And this blogger had some things that they needed to figure out to make this trap work for them, which were different than the things that I would need to make this trap work for me. So even though you have, I think, if you're just kind of on the surface, a trap that gives the information that you most want, which is it tells you how it works and it gives you things to interact with, so you can try to figure out how it works beyond just rolling like I check for traps kind of thing. It's great, but then even something that's kind of well designed from that standpoint, if you drill into it in different directions, you can end up in the spot where it's just like something doesn't quite fit. And it might not be the same for you or the same for me or the same for the creator, but we're all just kind of dealing with it different ways. Any last bits before, because it's basically the end of the hour, and a wonderful hour it was. I always enjoy hanging out. Would love if you guys actually sent me questions. You guys make me do all the work of finding blog stuff to talk about. But that's a rant for another time. Dicetail says if you needed a dungeon maintenance person, you could always have a skeleton crew. Oh, there you go. That would be good to have. That would be a fun thing to have if you were doing sort of a fun, lighthearted dungeon. Is literally have a skeleton crew, but that's a great. I guess not. I don't know if that's a pun. It's not a pun. What would we call that? Just a turn of phrase. Yeah, we don't have a full operating crew, but we don't have a full operating staff, but we do have a skeleton crew, and there are skeletons. They give the skeletons some tools. They could have skeleton keys. Like you could really go. And who's there? And what is there? Is their boss? Their manager? Some kind of ghoul? I mean, it makes sense. Zombies in accounting. Oh, we could go on and on. We could go on and on and on. That's all I got, folks. All right, I gotta get ready to get out of town. Let me know if you have questions, comments. Give me stuff. I keep saying this. I guess I'll keep saying it. I would love to read stuff that you guys bring to me, your own stuff if you want, that we can discuss rather than me just finding stuff randomly on the internet. So no one ever takes me up on this, but maybe someday they will. Send them to me. Drop me a line. I got the Discord I'm on. I got the forums I'm on. Social media I'm on it. Comments on these YouTube videos, that will also work. Plenty of ways to get a hold of me. And, if you're out there blogging, making content, share it with me and we can discuss it. Dicetail says, skeleton key, great treasure, could open other doors in Dungeon 4. Yeah, I know people have had that before, but I think having the skeletons with the skeleton key is I think, the master stroke, if I may say so myself. All right, folks, I'm going to let you go. Have a great rest of your day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Game on, everybody, and I'll talk to you later. Bye now.